She was born the daughter of a prostitute, raised in reform schools, and spent her teenage years surviving on the streets. Barbara Graham learned early that the world wasn't kind to women like her. She sold her body for money, fell in with dangerous men, and lived on the edge of survival. The newspapers would later call her Bloody Babs, a femme fatale who had lured an elderly woman to her death. But behind the headlines was a young mother who had never known stability, a woman who made terrible choices that would ultimately seal her fate. On the morning of June 3, 1955, inside San Quentin prison, Barbara Graham faced the one punishment no woman in California had seen in over half a century: the gas chamber. Unlike the men executed before her, she did not walk calmly to her death. Guards had to drag her as she screamed, "I want to live!" Her cries echoed down the cold prison corridor, carried on the footsteps of the officers forcing her forward. Witnesses said she fought until the very last moment, breaking down in tears before being strapped to the chair. As the cyanide pellets dropped, Barbara's final breath became a public spectacle, her beauty and defiance swallowed by a cloud of deadly gas. Her story became so infamous that in 1958, Hollywood adapted it into a film titled I Want to Live, a movie that blurred the line between fact and fiction and cemented Barbara Graham's name in American crime lore. Stay tuned, because what you are about to hear is one of the most bizarre and tragic true crime stories ever told, the kind that feels more like a movie script than reality. Barbara Elaine Ford entered the world already at a loss. Oakland, California, 1923. Her mother, Hortense, was barely more than a child herself, selling her body to survive, drifting between reform schools, and carrying the weight of a broken family. There was no father waiting by the crib, only noise, motion, and absence. When Barbara was 2, Hortense was locked away. The little girl was handed to strangers, shuffled between foster homes where bruises healed slower than the lessons. Be small. Don't hope. That was the rule. Years later, Hortense married again, changed her last name to Wood, and had another baby. But for Barbara, the door never reopened. Even when her mother came home at 21, she would not take her daughter back. Imagine a child staring at her own mother's face and learning what refusal really looks like. Barbara grew sharp from pain. She could read people the way others read weather, where the cold drafts were, where the exits hid. Teachers saw her intelligence, but brilliance without safety is like a candle in a storm. By her teenage years, she was running, caught, and sent to the Ventura State School for Girls. The same path her mother had walked. Reform, they called it. To Barbara, it was shame on a schedule. Released in 1939, she tried to build something steady. She married Harry Kielhamer, a Coast Guardsman, in 1940. She studied shorthand, had 2 sons, and swore they would never feel what she had felt. But money ran thin. Distance grew wide, and both carried wounds they pretended weren't there. In 1942, the court gave Harry the children. The silence that followed was the loneliest sound of her life. 2 more marriages came and went. Each time Barbara packed her hopes, each time the world reminded her of who it thought she was. The divorce was final, and with the stroke of a judge's pen, Barbara Ford, soon to be known as Barbara Graham, walked out of court stripped of what little stability she had left. Her 2 young sons were handed over to Henry, her ex-husband. She left the courthouse empty-handed, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a death march. Whatever chance she thought she had at being a mother was gone, and the hole inside her only grew deeper. With no diploma, no respectable job prospects, and a reputation already stained, Barbara drifted toward the only economy available to a young, pretty woman in wartime California, the trade her own mother had once survived on. By 22, she was part of a rough sisterhood of seagulls, prostitutes who worked the shadows of naval bases, where sailors came looking for brief companionship before shipping out. The money was fast, the nights restless, and the mornings forgettable. Barbara's flame-red hair and striking looks made her stand out in the blur of neon-lit bars and cheap motel rooms. She worked the Oakland Army Base, the Naval Depot, Alameda, and later Long Beach and San Diego, following the rhythm of troop movement like a ghost bound to the docks. In San Pedro, she was arrested on vice charges, her mugshot capturing the defiance in her eyes that prison walls would never erase. But Barbara didn't just sell her body, she learned to navigate the underworld. Her beauty became her armor, her charm a tool. Soon, she drifted into higher stakes circles of gambling, drugs, and hustlers who lived and died by the street. San Francisco pulled her into its orbit, where she worked under the notorious Madame Sally Stanford. Behind velvet drapes and champagne glasses, Barbara mingled with men who could pay for more than a night's comfort. Yet the thrill came with a cost. She was arrested again, this time for perjury, after trying to give two small-time criminals an alibi. The judge didn't buy her performance. Barbara was sentenced to 5 years in the California Women's State Prison at Tehachapi. Inside, she learned how to harden herself, how to play by prison politics, and how to keep that sharp edge of charm even when wearing prison blues. By the time she was released, she was tougher, more reckless, and more entangled in the orbit of career criminals than ever before. Trying to reset, Barbara drifted to Reno and Tonopah, Nevada, taking up brief stints as a waitress and even working in a hospital. But stability bored her. It never lasted. She craved the pulse of the city, the edge of risk. Soon enough, she was on a bus to Los Angeles, where Hollywood Boulevard promised a new beginning, though it was paved with the same shadows she always chased. There, she slid back into prostitution, her life marked by smoky bars, dingy rooms, and the constant hum of desperation beneath the glamour. But in one of those bars, fate introduced her to Henry Graham, a bartender with a steady gaze and rough charm. For the first time in years, Barbara let herself believe in something resembling normal. She married him in 1953, hoping a ring and a home could anchor her storm. They had a child together, a son named Tommy. For a brief moment, Barbara held on to the dream of family again, as if motherhood could cleanse her past. But behind the walls of their modest home, her restless spirit and old habits pulled at her. The streets still called her name, and the criminal underworld she once flirted with wasn't finished with her. Barbara Graham had tried to reinvent herself many times. Wife, mother, waitress, even patient caregiver. But the truth was written in her choices. She was a woman chasing belonging in all the wrong places, slipping further toward a destiny darker than she could yet imagine. Henry Graham is already wired to the shadows, hooked on illegal drugs, mean when he needs to be, a low-level criminal who knows the alleys better than the avenues. Through him, Barbara drifts into his circle. Jack Santo, cool and watchful, and Emmett, the Weasel Perkins, all sharp edges and hungry eyes. The nights stretch late, drinks blur, lines move. Barbara starts an affair with Perkins, and with it comes a whisper dressed up as opportunity. A 64-year-old widow in Burbank named Mabel Monahan, said to keep cash and jewelry tucked away inside her quiet house. Monahan isn't some anonymous name in a phone book. She's a retired vaudeville performer who once worked the Keith Albee circuit, the old glamour now traded for a careful life in a suburban room with heavy curtains. Her ex-son-in-law, Luther B. Scherer, is 74, a multimillionaire who owns gambling clubs in Palm Springs and casinos in Las Vegas, a man long rumored to have deep ties to crime syndicates. 2 years ago, Monahan's daughter Iris divorced Scherer and took the Burbank home in the settlement. Then she remarried and left for New York, leaving Mabel in the house and the neighborhood gossip machine running hot. Mabel and Scherer stayed close, and that friendship, odd, enduring, public, kept the rumors alive. In bars and back rooms, one story grows legs. Scherer trusts Monahan so completely, he's hidden $100,000 in a safe inside her home. Money that, by the way people talk, could set up anyone clever enough to find it. About $1,044,292 in 2022 terms. It's not just cash. Some say there are stones in the mix, jewels that don't blink when the light hits them. To people like Perkins and Santo, legends like that don't feel like legends. They feel like directions. The plan gathers in fragments. Baxter Shorter, A safecracker with a reputation and a conscience he claims shows up when it counts, becomes the missing piece. John True floats between them, a witness in the making and a man who will later tell a version of events that doesn't match anybody else's perfectly. On March 8, 1953, the group meets for dinner in the San Fernando Valley. Graham, Perkins, Santo, True, and Shorter around a table, smoke in the air, the future clinking in glasses. Shorter says he doesn't want Graham involved. "She's a dame," he mutters, but Perkins argues she's essential. Who else could get a wary widow to open her door at night? The next evening, March 9th, 1953, Barbara walks up to Monahan's front door with a script simple enough to sound true. "Car trouble, can I please use your phone?" It's the old trick that never quite dies. The door opens. A breath later, the others slide in behind her. Perkins, Santo, True, and Shorter arrives after. Shorter will later insist that by the time he steps inside, Monahan is already bleeding, her mouth gagged, breath struggling. The house turns frantic. Drawers ripped out, cushions knifed, shadows moving fast. They tear the place apart, hunting a safe that refuses to exist. Then the accounts split like light through glass. John True will testify that Barbara hands a gun to Perkins and says, "Knock her out." Shorter, for his part, paints himself as the man who tries to pull the night back from the edge. He throws Perkins to the floor, tells True to remove the gag because Monahan can't breathe, tries to turn violence into restraint. True never mentions that. In his telling, Barbara herself unleashes the beating. Vicious, shocking, personal. 2 stories, 1 room, a single victim. When they finally leave, Santo assumes Monahan is dead. The house is a wreck, the safe a myth, the promise of cash and diamonds evaporated. Shorter, alone and rattled, claims he calls for help from a payphone, spitting out an address that comes out wrong under the pressure. No squad car arrives, no siren cuts the night. 2 days pass. Monahan's gardener finds her. The score, it turns out, never existed the way they believed. The safe isn't real. Nothing of value turns up in their hands. At trial, they'll learn what must have felt like a cosmic joke. $15,000 in jewelry and valuables, about $156,630 in 2022 dollars, sat in a purse in the closet, inches from the chaos, untouched. Iris, horrified and grieving from New York, offers a $5,000 reward, roughly $52,210 in 2022, for information leading to the arrest and conviction of whoever killed her mother. What remains is the wreckage. A widow dead in a quiet Burbank home, a rumor inflated into motive, a crew stitched together by need, lust, and greed, and a woman at the center, Barbara, whose presence at the door turned a whispered legend into a crime scene. From this point forward, the story won't belong to the bars where it started. It will belong to affidavits and courtrooms, to clashing testimonies from Baxter Shorter and John True, to a jury trying to read the truth under fluorescent lights. And for Barbara, who once believed she could play the role required to survive, the part she chose at Monahan's door will become the one she cannot escape. March 26, 1953. The case takes a sharp turn. Police swoop in and arrest 5 men connected to the murder of Mabel Monahan. 3 of them are known associates of Los Angeles gangster Mickey Cohen. Alongside them is another man, and Baxter Shorter, the safecracker. Each man has ties to Monahan through her ex-son-in-law, Luther Scherer. But when the dust settles, the police have no hard evidence. All 5 walk free, but Shorter is rattled. He knows he was there, knows the gas chamber waits if the police can prove it. Desperate, he volunteers to turn state's evidence. In exchange for protection, he spills the story. Perkins was the one who struck Monahan with the gun. He tells detectives how the night unfolded, how a robbery became a killing. But in Los Angeles, secrets never stay buried. Word of his confession leaks. Days later, Shorter disappears. He is kidnapped and murdered. Perkins and Santo make sure of it. His body is never found. Shorter's vanishing shocks the investigation. Then another voice steps forward. William Upshaw, a convicted felon, decides to testify before the grand jury. Upshaw says he was in the car with Barbara Graham, Perkins, Santo, True, and Shorter the night before the murder. He describes them circling Monahan's home, running through the plan. Upshaw admits he backed out, too afraid of Scherer, the powerful gambler with rumored mob ties. His testimony adds new weight. Soon, John True makes his move. Offered immunity from prosecution, he agrees to testify. In court, True points his finger squarely at Barbara Graham. She protests again and again, insisting on her innocence, but the damage is done. The press has already chosen her role. They call her Bloody Babs, a name splashed across front pages dripping with disgust. She becomes the face of the crime, the femme fatale who lured a widow to her death. Public sympathy is gone. Barbara's defense collapses further when she makes a desperate gamble. Behind bars, she accepts another inmate's offer. For $25,000, the inmate and a friend will provide a false alibi. But it's a trap. The inmate is angling for leniency. The friend is an undercover officer. Barbara meets him, believing she's buying her way to freedom. Instead, the officer presses her to admit she was at the scene. Their conversation is recorded. That recording becomes the nail in her coffin. The attempt to buy perjury, her taped admission, and her past conviction for lying under oath. All of it combines to destroy her credibility before the jury. Any chance at convincing them she was innocent is gone. When confronted in court about her actions, Barbara breaks. "Oh, have you ever been desperate?" she asks the courtroom. "Do you know what it means not to know what to do?" It is not enough. The jury doesn't see desperation. They see guilt. Barbara Graham is convicted of murder. The inmate who betrayed her walks free, her sentence commuted to time served. The prosecution, led by District Attorney J. Miller Levy, has secured its victory. Barbara's fate is sealed. The woman once known as Barbara Ford, then Barbara Graham, now Bloody Babs, has taken her final step into history. Not as a mother, not as a wife, but as the most infamous female face to ever sit in California's gas chamber. Barbara Graham, along with Santo and Perkins, was sentenced to death for the robbery and murder of Mabel Monahan. While locked behind the high walls of the California Institution for Women in Chino, she fought to stay her fate. Appeals were filed, hopes briefly flickered, but every court denied them. The sentence stood. On June 2, 1955, Barbara was transferred to San Quentin State Prison, the shadow of death looming closer with every passing hour. The next day, June 3rd, was scheduled for her execution at 10 a.m. The morning air was thick with tension. Reporters gathered, guards readied, and Barbara waited in her cell. At the last minute, California Governor Goodwin J. Knight stayed the execution until 10:45 a.m. Then again, at 10:43 a.m., it was postponed to 11:30 a.m. Each delay tightened the knots in Barbara's chest. She protested sharply, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Why do they torture me? I was ready to go at 10 o'clock." When the moment finally came, Barbara refused to walk to the gas chamber. She screamed, pleading, "I want to live! I want to live!" Her resistance forced the guards to carry her, the sound of her cries echoing through the cold halls of San Quentin. She was strapped into the chamber, a blindfold placed over her eyes so she would not have to see the faces of the witnesses. Moments before the cyanide pellets were dropped, a guard suggested that taking a deep breath would make the process easier. Barbara's voice, sharp and defiant, cut through the chamber. "How the hell would you know?" Then, with a quiet clarity that belied the horror around her, she offered her final words. "Good people are always so sure they're right." The gas hissed, smoke curling upward, and the life of Barbara Graham, once a young woman lost in the shadows of desperation, ended in the cold embrace of justice, or vengeance, depending on who told the story. Her death made headlines, cementing her legacy as Bloody Babs, the woman whose choices, charms, and crimes had carried her from the streets of Los Angeles to the gas chamber of San Quentin. Even as the chamber grew still, the memory of her struggles, her cries, and her desperate fight for life lingered, a haunting echo of a woman trapped by fate and by her own past.